The NFC North enters the 2025 season in a very good spot. Every single one of these teams has talent up and down their roster. We saw last season in 2024, the Lions take the number one seed in the conference with the Vikings and the Packers falling in the wild card slots. All of these teams are incredibly talented. They made improvements this offseason, and they have a really tough non division schedule that is going to make things an absolute movie to watch during this NFL season. Now, all these teams have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses, but all these teams have a realistic shot at winning this division and making the playoffs in 2025, potentially seeing our first ever division with four playoff teams. We will see, but let's break down the NFC North and the bloodbath that's ahead in the 2025 season. What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Linkletter. You can find me on socials at BlitzLink, and today we're talking about the NFC North, the hardest division of the NFL entering the 2025 season. As I mentioned in the intro to this video, each of these teams made moves to improve in the offseason, still have to face each other and have a really tough schedule ahead. Let's start off with the team that made the most drastic changes this offseason, and it was the Chicago Bears. The Bears are coming off of a 5-12 season in 2024, and they are aimed to turn around their fortunes over the last few seasons. We all know the struggles they had last year. Caleb Williams didn't necessarily get any better in his first year as an NFL starter, and we didn't really see much progress despite having a talented roster. Now, Ryan Poles is still the GM, and I really do think Ryan Poles has done a great job of assembling a really strong roster, but the coaching staff last season, led by Matt Eberflus and the disgusting coordinator Shane Waldron, ruined this Bears team, which led to a 5-12 season. Now in 2025, a division rival comes over in Ben Johnson, and you get the former Saints head coach Dennis Allen for the defensive coordinator, forming a really strong duo at the top of this Bears team that should provide a foundation, which it seems like they've been missing in the locker room. In the draft, they went out and added to this team. They went out and got Colston Loveland at the tight end position from Michigan. Honestly, reminds me a lot of Darren Waller, and he fits really well with Ben Johnson's offense. Johnson has raved about Loveland's work ethic and also saying a college coach told him he's the most talented player by far that he has ever coached. In round two, they pick up Luther Burden, who has had some off the field stuff, but is nonetheless a very explosive pass catcher and was a projected first round pick heading into the year. You get Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College and should be a good swing tackle for them. Shamar Stewart is a run stuff defensive tackle, and I really like what they did. And they had Za Frazier in day three, which I think is a good depth piece in the secondary. There's something about UTSA corners that produce well. I already mentioned the biggest move of the offseason, which was getting Ben Johnson. Johnson scored 29 points per game from 2022 to 2024 and immediately established the interior offensive line of this team that was one of the worst in the NFL last year. They went onside Drew Dahlman from the Falcons for 3 years, who was a top 10 graded center in the NFL last season, according to PFF. You get former Detroit Lion Jonah Jackson, who was playing for the Rams, to come over for Chicago. And then the biggest move of them all, they go and add Joe Thuney at left guard, paying him massive money to go be that veteran on this offensive line. Ben Johnson improved his interior offensive line, and that's the biggest thing he wanted to address when coming over. They also made some moves on the defensive side of the ball, like adding Grady Jarrett, Diote Aimbo, however it's pronounced, but I try my best. And this team is once again geared up for a really, really talented roster now with two different coaches in. We will see if they can take a step forward in 2025. The next team, the Detroit Lions, are heading in a bit different direction than the Chicago Bears. They lose both their offense and defensive coordinator heading into the year after an historic 15-2 run that saw them be the NFC North champions and the number one team in the NFL. Now the Lions, maybe not for defensive injuries, would have won the Super Bowl last year, but what happened on the defensive side of the ball with this team was absolutely sad to watch. Basically, every player was hurt last year. So addressing the depth of this team and making some moves here and there was the biggest thing this Lions team needed. Obviously, the coordinator shift will be very interesting as they brought in an outside hire for the offensive coordinator position. So we will see what this team will look like and how different it'll be from the Ben Johnson days. But the draft picks are where I kind of really like what they did this offseason. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State provides a really good run stuff interior defensive lineman. You pair him with DJ Reader in the middle of this defense. It's a really good duo there that they're going to have. Tate Ratledge coming in at offensive guard to replace a guy like Kevin Zeitler, who was incredibly good for them. Obviously, you're missing Frank Ragnow as well, but Tate Ratledge is the start of the newer interior offensive line for this Lions team. Isaac Tesla, also a player that they really liked in the draft, showed really well in his first preseason game, which is exciting to see. They also added more interior offensive lineman in Miles Frazier. So they really tried to establish some of their biggest needs from last year. Wide receiver depth is something that they wanted to improve. They wanted to improve the interior defensive part of that line and get some younger guards in there, which is good. This offseason, they weren't necessarily very quiet either. They went out and got Marcus Davenport on the edge to go across from Aiden Hutchinson. They went out and got a big free agent in DJ Reed and replaced Carlton Davis with him, which is a good move, I believe. I think Reed is the better player. And they also extended Kirby Joseph. So they have their core intact, and they're once again really ready to show that last year was no fluke, despite the changes in the coaching staff and a few players missing here and there. This Lions team is going to be dominant for the next decade. The next team is the Green Bay Packers, a team that has historically performed very well in this division, and it's called Title Town for a reason. The Packers haven't necessarily reached that, though, as of late, and it was a bit of a letdown with no improvement from 2023 to 2024, despite Jordan Love breaking out. Obviously, Love suffered from injuries and wasn't necessarily the same player, and they relied heavily on Josh Jacobs in the ground game. An 11-6 season is nothing to be disappointed with, but I think the Packers had more expectations than what their production was last season. Ultimately, a team that didn't necessarily have a true wide receiver one, and they had an inconsistent defense, wasn't a good pair with a quarterback that struggled with injuries, and a team that needed a guy to step up defensively and didn't really have that outside of Xavier McKinney. It was nice to see, though, what they kind of produced there in their draft class of 2023 on the defensive side of the ball, but I think they needed to build on it more heading into this year, and I think they did a decent job of doing that. Their biggest thing in the draft was we need to go add talent on the offensive side of the ball, and they did it in the first round by going and getting Matthew Golden, a speedy wide receiver from Texas, who has been playing all with the first team right now, and it clearly seems like Matt LaFleur is trying to get this guy involved as much as they can. They also went on and got Savion Williams for the wide receiver position as well, and then Anthony Belton on the offensive line. I think they addressing those tackle positions, the wide receiver positions, was such a big need for this Packers team. So really solid moves there. And then day 3, they went out and just went all defense. So don't hate that move at all. Off-season moves, Aaron Banks to a massive contract like that, was not expecting that. That was an interesting move to say the least, but it helps boast this offensive line and the interior part for a few years to come. Nate Hobbs, he was actually a little bit underrated last year. He was 11th lowest expected points added in coverage among DBs, which is definitely interesting for sure. I think the DB situation, especially with Jair Alexander now gone, it's going to be interesting to watch this group in 2025. You do have cornerstones in the secondary like Xavier McKinney, which is definitely big time. But this Packers team, you could argue, has the least talented roster of the group. And I'm interested to see what probably one of the best coaches in the NFL, and Matt LaFleur, has up his sleeve in 2025 to continue to have this group to compete with all these teams in their division and the NFC conference. And then the final team, probably with the most unknowns, is the Minnesota Vikings. And they had a great, maybe A-plus offseason. The Vikings went 14-3 last year, and they had an A-plus offseason. Think about that. Sam Darnold stepped into this team with JJ McCarthy being injured and absolutely balled out, putting this team in a great position for long-term confidence after the Kirk Cousins departure 2 years prior now. Now JJ McCarthy, who missed all of last season with injury, is slotted in as the team's starting quarterback. And, Kawesi did a great job of adding talent around them. In round 1, you get Donovan Jackson on the offensive line. In round 3, you get Ty Felton at receiver, and then you get some depth in day 3. But outside of Donovan Jackson, they went on and got Will Fries and Brian Kelly from the Colts, and now you have a strong interior offensive line with 2 already really good tackles. You have a top 5 offensive line now. You have Aaron Jones paired with Jordan Mason, who they also added in free agency. And then in receiver, you have Jettas, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson at tight end. That is basically the best case scenario as a guy walking into a starting quarterback position. Add in the fact you have Kevin O'Connell as your head coach. This Minnesota Vikings offense is in a perfect spot to succeed. Now, defensively, there's a bit of change that does make me concerned. I think re-signing Byron Murphy was a great move for this team. They needed to get back him or Cam Bynum, and they chose him. But I'm worried about the two defensive tackle signings where they have a lot of money invested in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Both players are power rushers and were among two of the lowest graded players against the run last year at the defensive tackle position. This team lacks interior strength, stopping the run. And if teams are going to be able to run the ball at the middle against the Vikings, it's going to make it very hard in the division with David Montgomery. You have obviously Josh Jacobs in there as well, and we'll see what Ben Johnson has up his sleeve for their early down work. And I think that could be the biggest weakness with this Vikings team, not necessarily with JJ McCarthy as a starter. Now, we broke down all four teams heading into the year. Here's my actual analysis on how this division is going to play out. It is going to be incredibly tough for any of these teams to gain a significant advantage and leapfrog anybody in this division. I think this division race is once again going to go down to the wire. If I think a team has the highest ceiling, it's obviously the Detroit Lions. We saw them produce like they did last season, and they have the most talent on any of their rosters. And they have a group that's done it. They've been in the playoffs now in good spots for the last 2 years. And this team's hungry to finally get over that hump. And they have a great coach in Dan Campbell who is going to preach for this team to keep chasing greatness, which is something that is interesting. Do I think they're going to be as good as last year? Maybe not. But this Detroit Lions team is once again positioned for a really good spot. The two teams that I think have the highest variance are the Bears and the Vikings. The Vikings, like I just mentioned, have a really good offensive core right now, as long as JJ McCarthy continues to produce. And I think Kevin O'Connell is going to elevate his play. We've seen him do it with Kirk Cousins. We've seen him do it with Sam Darnold. He's going to do it with JJ McCarthy. And then the Bears, they're the biggest question mark in terms of variance too, because the roster is so talented. They have as talented of a roster as anybody in the league. It's just, will they be able to put all the pieces together, overcome all these bad demons in the past, and can Ben Johnson elevate this group and improve Caleb Williams' performances from last season? But the Packers have me the most concerned. This defense isn't great. They don't do anything well, but Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love are going to have to carry this team on a consistent basis. If I were to predict the division right now, I would go Lions 1, Vikings 2, Bears 3, Packers 4. And I think it would be interesting to see what each of these teams cook up to potentially go out there and, improve heading into the year. And I think the Packers are a team that could increase their ceiling for me if they do show a little bit of progress on the defensive side of the ball from last year, despite not necessarily making a ton of moves to show that they're willing to better that unit. All in all, though, this NFC North race is up for grabs and anybody can win the division. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think. Which of these teams are in the best position to win the NFC North heading into 2025? Hit that subscribe button for more Blitz Sports Media content, and I will catch you guys next time.